This week we watched a documentary called The Oath. I really enjoyed the style of this documentary. A lot of documentaries that I've seen, there's a lot of narration by the documentarian themselves. It's always like, oh, when I went to Yemen and I encountered this or that. And I feel when there's a lot of, you know, voiceover by the actual documentarian, it takes away from the story in which they're trying to tell. It kind of becomes more about the documentarian's experience than the actual people within the documentary, which I think that makes for a kind of less interesting piece. I also really enjoyed the aesthetics of the documentary itself. There were a lot of shots of the area in which Hamdan and Jendal were from, which I think was really helpful because I personally am not familiar with Yemen at all. And it also added to just the feel of the characters and being able to relate to each and every one of them. I think that's really important in documentaries. What's a documentary if you can't relate and understand the people that the documentary is about? During the Q&A session, someone brought up the question of the language barrier. The documentarian mentioned that she didn't speak any Arabic, and she went to Yemen actually by herself. She filmed all of this movie entirely by herself, and what she would do was she would record the responses that the characters or the people would say, and then she would eventually have them translated. But something that I thought was interesting was she mentioned that there were a lot of things that just kind of surpassed the language barrier, and I think, and then she didn't need translated right away. I think this is just interesting, and I think it says a lot about human nature in general. No matter what our situation is, this director, she's from America, and these people are from a completely different area. Like, Yemen is completely different than the United States, but there are still things that, we can understand just as humans, and I thought that was, displayed very well in the documentary. Another thing I learned from the Q&A section was one of her real motivators for making this documentary was to kind of put a face to a name. Ever since 9/11, we've been hearing so many stories about, people that are connected with Al-Qaeda or, people that are in Guantanamo Bay, but they're always just like names that are in the newspaper or in the news, and we never really get to know, what kind of emotions go along with these people and how they feel about their actual situations. So I really enjoyed that this documentary touched upon this, and that was pretty much what the entire documentary was about. So overall, I really enjoyed this documentary. I would suggest it to anyone who has even like the slightest bit of interest in these subjects, and yeah, it was a really enjoyable movie, and I would definitely watch it again.